Kazakhstan, and the repercussions of that. Also note that the chairman of the National Security Committee, Народная Безопасность Комитет, NBK, was removed from his post on the 5th of January, and he was arrested yesterday, charged with high treason. Karim Massimov. Massimov, who twice been prime minister, was prime minister about 2015, most recently, and had even been tipped as a successor as president to Nazarbayev, but now Massimov is in prison. So what's this all about? Is he really suspected of being a traitor, or is it a convenient excuse for Tokayev to try and remove Nazarbayev's acolytes? Because Soviet style would be to remove your rival's loyalists, and then eventually go after that rival himself, Nazarbayev. I suspect Nazarbayev is too big a beast. It's been dinned into people for decades that Nazarbayev, well, that the sun shines out of his cloaca. So I don't think they can do that. And they can defang him. But I perhaps should have started with this, that President Tokayev, he claimed that 20,000 armed terrorists attacked Almaty. 20,000, get that? And how many members of the security forces did he say were killed? 18. So 20,000 armed terrorists only managed to kill 18 members of the security forces. It's not remotely credible. It's possible that no members of the security forces whatsoever were killed. No names have been released. No images of dead soldiers, dead police officers have been released, and the Kazakh news is not shy about showing this. So again, this is the Soviet way to deal with the situation. You false accuse peaceful protesters of being armed terrorists. You let them burn down a building, or indeed you burn it down yourself. Because this is a police state. I've never seen so many police officers as I have when I was in Kazakhstan. And if a mob was going to burn down the building, the police ought to just stand back and let it happen. In Zhanaozen, 2011, that's what happened. A building was burnt down, but that was behind a police cordon and fence. So presumably the police burnt it down themselves to provide a pretext to then shoot down unarmed protesters. So Nazarbayev claims that they've killed 28 terrorists, and they've wounded a similar number, about another 28, and they've arrested 4,000 people. So 20,000 terrorists, they've accounted about 4,000. So what happened to the other 16,000? It is a flagrant fabrication. It's an outrageous lie. So there he is, blackguarding peaceful demonstrators as terrorists and shooting dead unarmed people. You see this image is that the Kazakh media will happily show of the police and army shooting down streets, but nobody's shooting back, because nobody is shooting back. They said that they trained in another country. Which country did they train in? There's no corroboratory details which are released. And what are the names of these organizations? What's their ideology? What I expect is coming next is they'll say that they're Islamists, they're Al-Qaeda and ISIS types, thinking that will blunt the execration he deserves from the West for perpetrating a massacre against his own people, for exercising their constitutional rights. You know, Kazakh people who've simply stood on the street a couple of years ago holding up placards with quotations of their constitution, they were arrested for quoting their constitution. Can you believe that? That's how oppressive it is. What harm does that do? Why is it a crime to quote your own constitution? I suppose because Tokayev just blatantly breaches his constitution every single day, like his predecessor Nazarbayev. But the Nazarbayev dynamic, that's a fascinating thing I'll get into a little bit more. So President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, 2 days ago, he said the security forces have been ordered to shoot to kill these terrorists without permission. Without warning. You suspect someone's a terrorist, you shoot them dead instantly. And so he appealed to the Collective Security Treaty Organization to send in troops to assist him. 2,500 come in. Now, this is an unwelcome diversion in the Ukraine situation for Russia. Having said that, only about 2,000 Russian troops are in Kazakhstan, so that's a drop in the ocean compared to their military. And so there's some sort of tranquility's returned to Almaty, but if you go too close to a roadblock, they'll fire warning shots. They cancelled domestic flights, international flights, and so on. So authorities say that at least one child was shot dead. Anyway, so yeah, 26 terrorists, they said, were killed. 26, they say, were wounded. 700 people have been injured, mostly security forces. And no names have been released, which makes it deeply suspicious. They say they've killed 28. I would say there's probably a zero behind that. So it's a bit like that massacre was perpetrated in Uzbekistan about 15 years ago. Anyway, it's monstrous. Or the Zheltoksan massacre, where the Soviet government admitted having killed like 2 people or something. Or the Zhenalzhen massacre 2011, when they said the police had shot 100 but killed only 16. Only 16% fatality rate for being shot. Now, even though shooting them all in the legs, you think more of them would die than that, just from exsanguination. And what precipitated this was the more than doubling the rise in liquefied petroleum gas, which is used as a car fuel in most of the country. About 90% of the cars run on that. Even those who don't have a car, most people don't have a car, have to pay for bus tickets, have to buy things delivered by trucks. It's going to hit everybody. So people are furious that the elite is ripping them off just to make even more money in this tiny cabal of billionaires around Tokayev and Nazarbayev. But yeah, the really fascinating thing is that what's happening to Massimov and the way Nazarbayev, who was chairman of the Kazakh Security Council, he was removed from his post a few days ago, and Tokayev assumed that mantle for himself. Now, Nazarbayev is still leader of the nation, a position he holds for life, but has he effectively lost his power, or is this just a cosmetic change to assuage the fury of the protesters? Is Tokayev really in charge now? Because for a few years, people panned him as a lightweight. He had no following. He's totally lacking in charisma. He's this decidedly dull apparatchik. And so maybe Nazarbayev is really the power behind the throne, because he just doesn't want to have to go to these tedious meetings and show up in public his health isn't up to it. But maybe we're wrong. Maybe Tokayev has now finally taken charge by removing Massimov, by taking away one of Nazarbayev's major offices. So maybe Nazarbayev will become the figurehead. Up until now, we thought that Tokayev was a figurehead, and really, Nazarbayev was calling the shots. He retired in March 2019. But nevertheless, he went abroad to represent Kazakhstan as its head of state a few times after that, even though he's leader of the nation, not president. Tokayev is president. Even Armenia sent troops to Kazakhstan as part of the CSTO, and Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan of Armenia was obviously reluctant about this, so they'll be there for a short time, remembering he came to office in a bloodless coup in 2018. So Peskov, who's Putin's spokesman, said, we're not going to send any troops to Kazakhstan, has to be handled internally. But just hours later, that decision was reversed when Kazakhstan formally requested CSTO troops. Otherwise, the CSTO would be seen as pretty useless, and Russia doesn't want disorder on its flank, doesn't want a precedent to be set, and the Russians have got ideas that they could peacefully overthrow their dictatorship as well. So it's all rather dispiriting. Apparently there's some very small protests going on, but there's going to be a huge crackdown on dissent now, and some of the protesters have got their message out, saying, we're not terrorists at all, we just want to reform, we want real democracy, we want an end to kleptocracy, we don't want to be ruled by people robbing us blind, we want the constitution to be actually upheld, to unban all these political parties like Democratic Choice of Kazakhstan, to have real elections. Tokayev and Nazarbayev have got to go. Now, if people have trained abroad, well, the only thing that could have a grain of truth there is Mukhtar Ablyazov, the leader of Democratic Choice of Kazakhstan. He's in exile in France. So if you accounted for 4,000 terrorists, that's another 16,000 who are on the loose. 16,000. And also, if terrorists do fight, they don't gather in a dense crowd in the middle of the street, make it easy to shoot them. They would be hiding in buildings here and there, sniping at you. So they're yet more flagrant lies from the Tokayev regime meant to be justificatory of this mass murder he's perpetrated on the streets against his own unarmed citizens. Well, it's very dispiriting, and he'll get away with it, and they always do. And that is the very unjust and cruel world we live in. Well, I'm very proud, very lucky to be Irish, to be British, to live in a free country. Okay, goodbye.